Hello and welcome to TAL Radio. At TAL, we connect those who are willing to give to those who are in need. My lovely listeners and my lovely audience, you're watching and listening to a wonderful series on self coaching. It's my pleasure to have Andrew Tallents back with us on TAL Radio. Andrew, welcome to TAL Radio.
Hi, Sandy. Great to be on the show again.
Thank you so much. And this week we would be talking about resilience in leadership. Now, that's a pretty catchy subject, I would say. Let me just start by asking, how would you define resilience especially in today's context of leadership?
Some people find this a very difficult concept to understand, and I understand why. Probably 10, 20 years ago, resilience around the world was certainly associated with our ability to bounce back from setbacks. So if we become ill, or if we have a serious accident, or we have a serious relationship issue, it's about our ability to get back to how we were. And actually, that's an old version of resilience, in my view. I think there's some truth to it. But I think if we think about the new version of resilience in this world today, I think it's more about us having the ability to adapt in the moment, depending on what's happening around us, which is slightly different. So it's not about setbacks. It's when things happen around us we're not expecting. How do we become agile and adapt to make sure that we can still do those things, trusting we already are enough, we already have the resources to be able to do those things in difficult times. So that's how I would describe resilience in leadership.
So technically, it's not about setbacks, or probably, could you say that it's about bouncing back? Would that be a better word?
I don't think so, and it's a good question, because bouncing back signifies that we went down in the first place. And I think what resilience is in today's world, particularly with all of the technology around us and all the things that are happening, it's about our ability in the moment not to actually have that setback or to go down from then. So we don't need to bounce back. It's just, as the word suggests, being resilient in the moment, knowing that we're all going to be okay. We'll discuss that because it links into a lot of the topics we've already discussed in terms of what makes good resilience.
And I think resilience is actually the word at the moment because everybody is talking about it. So when we talk about everybody, what do you feel, do you really feel that why do some leaders seem to thrive under pressures while others crumbles? Is there a difference in leadership qualities? Is that why it happens?
I think it is. There are 4 factors really that enable resilience to be in place on a daily basis. We've talked about some of these before. The first is the leader's ability to be present in the moment. Because again, we talked about this, if we're present in the moment, we can't be thinking about the past or the future, and therefore we are already enough in that moment. It's when people do public speaking, we're worried about, are we going to forget something? But if we're present in the moment, we'll usually remember what it is that we're supposed to say. So that's the first thing. The second is that we are able in that moment to maximize our energy for the job that we're doing. So we have that ability in that moment to make the biggest impact. So that's really, really important. The third element is actually then going back to our ability to create space around us when things get really, really difficult for us. So we pause and we reflect and we make sure we slow down. So that's the third element. And then the fourth element, which we've talked about earlier in this series, is about making sure we reconnect with purpose. So as in we're in this moment, which we're facing, which is very difficult for us, we're really connecting with why we're here in this moment. And that's the thing that's going to get us through and make us resilient. So they're the 4 elements that leaders who have resilience maintain, and why others don't necessarily have that quality in that moment. We can get it back, we'll talk about later, but that's probably the difference.
And something that really, I believe, intrigued me at the moment is, you talked about 4 factors. So does accountability also hold a place here?
It does, and it's linked to purpose. So when I get up in the morning and I know what my purpose is, am I going to hold myself to account during the day when things get difficult and therefore be resilient? Or am I actually going to just forget what my purpose is for today because I want to let myself off the hook and just give myself a break, which is not a problem if we're intending to do it, but we've got to know we're doing it maybe to regain our energy. So yeah, accountability is a big part.
I love it because I remember the last episode we did about on that, so it's probably still lingering on my head.
Yeah.
All right. So moving ahead, so do you believe that resilience is something that people can really build over time? It's not that you need to be born with; it's probably your experiences that teach you that.
It is, and again, my belief is that when we are born and when we're children, If we have had childhoods which have been happy places without any trauma, then we have this ability to be resilient as children. You can see when children are in different hardships, they can cope with those particular things. So I think what happens is we become adults, we actually start getting in relationships, we start forgetting about our resilience factors, and then we can start to crumble in various areas. So we can, as humans, go back to not having resilience, but we can build it. And it's by practicing those four things, but it's also a mindset thing as well. So I believe every single person out there that's listening to this, if they're not feeling resilient at the moment, we need to seek help, we need support, we need friends around us. But by practicing in those four areas, we can start to build the resilience again.
I think it's very true when you said that, people who really suffer hardship and all, though they're pretty resilient, and that's how kids also develop that same factor. It's not that you're born with it, but the situations that you go through. And no wonder whenever we listen to a success story of any leader or anybody across the globe, it is all about the hardship that they went through and how resilient they were while all that suffering. Lovely. So moving on, I would really like to know what are some of the early warning signs that a leader's resilience is being tested, or it's like stretched or it's too thin.
A number of things here. So we should watch out for these factors with the people around us because it probably means they need some help as well. So we can check in whether they're okay. So the first is that sometimes people who were normally very timely, on time for meetings, suddenly don't turn up for meetings, or they're running late, or there's some inexplicable reason why they're not maybe present in those meetings. So being aware of that, there's a change in behavior around timeliness because they've been used to having space. The second is, and this can happen for a number of reasons, but it might be that you notice extreme tiredness in the individual. Because when we're showing low resilience, we're usually tired, we aren't getting sleep, we're not maybe keeping fit, and therefore tiredness, falling asleep in meetings, or just feeling very lacking energy is a second symptom. A third area that we need to look at is, do we feel that the individual around us is maybe feeling a bit irritable, maybe a bit frustrated, maybe they're not feeling as though they're getting where they need to. So again, it's just that frustration tends to come out, and we notice that. And the fourth area is, it may be that they're not maybe as happy as they normally are, just in their general well-being and the way they feel. You notice there's something not quite right about them. Maybe they're feeling a bit down or sad. So those elements can give us an indication that resilience is low. And the first reaction to that should be, can we help? Is everything okay? As opposed to criticizing or judging, because we just don't know what's going on in people's lives.
That's very true. And when you were just mentioning all these factors, all I could think of, I mean, excuse me for saying this, and I'm sure Gen Zs would hate me for this, but I think that's what we really find in Gen Z so much. All these things, this lack of sleep, deprivation, and all these like frustration, probably.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
sorry to say that, but that's what everybody is feeling nowadays.
Yeah, yeah.
So when we talk about leaders, when leaders hit, a setback or they face a certain kind of criticism, which really happens, but how can they really respond to it in such a way that really builds resilience rather than it depletes it?
I love this question because it's something that many of us don't do. And I think we have to move from this immediate response of defensiveness, which is what you're talking about. Maybe we're usually resilient and can go through, but for some reason, we're not feeling that right now. And so as soon as we have that feeling of defensiveness, I'm about to defend myself from what I've just heard. I don't think what's just been said has been fair, or the way I've been treated is not fair. Then I need to move into a position of curiosity. And by going into a position of curiosity, which is never asking a question why, by the way, because if we ask why, it evokes a defensive response. But when we're curious, we can say something like, that was really interesting what you just said there. What did you actually mean by it? Or how do you think what you told me might help me going forward? Or when you actually said that thing, where did you see me doing that last time? Because I'm really interested in that. But we're going into a position of curiosity because there's a gift, there's information, which will help us just to assimilate that information a lot more. And it means we're going to be more resourceful the next time we might hear a statement like that, because we have a different interpretation to draw upon. So I think moving from defensiveness feeling to curiosity usually leads to some kind of gift.
That was enlightening. Really? I mean, because we all have this attitude of like anytime something is said against us, it's like whether it's good or bad, we do have the defense mechanism that automatically pops up. But yes, it is so beautiful that you can just change that attitude and be curious, as you said. Lovely. So when you know leaders, they are generally under pressure. We all know it. It's a reality. So, what role does mindset play in helping leaders stay adaptable and composed under these circumstances?
So mindset's really important, and it's about being decisive in the plan and routine that a leader puts in place. So it could be about a morning routine of either meditation or fitness or walking, creating that space for the leader to really connect with what it is they want to do that day. But it's also protecting space during the day. So having the mindset that no matter what comes around me that's interesting, I need to keep true to what I'm here to do today and don't be distracted by all those shiny things that are very interesting for me to look at and maybe put my attention to, but not the focused areas I need to be in. And then I think the final area is around about how people almost finish the day. Because I think when we finish the day, sometimes it's this case of we may be self-critical, we look back in judgment, but it's about feeling gratitude for the things that we've done that day, being kind to ourselves, and just asking the questions about have we held ourselves to account? What things can we do differently tomorrow to make even more of a difference? So I think they're the things that keep a positive mindset because it's very much focused on what we're in control of as opposed to what we can't control.
All right. So now, we have really talked about sense of purpose and our personal values. So when we talk about with respect to leaders, so how does a leader's sense of purpose or, personal values, how do these characteristics or these traits, this supports, they support his or her resilience?
What we tend to find is if somebody's, not everyone is, by the way, we talked about this before, but if somebody's really clear about their purpose, about why they're here and what they're doing now, and they're very clear about the values, how they live their lives, it's almost like a stick of rock where all the way through they are there for the person. And if therefore they are there and they never really diversify from that, it means that people, when they experience that kind of leader, know exactly how they're going to be in relationships. So if that's the case, it means that normally there is certainty in terms of the things I'm doing rather than uncertainty, and I'm very predictable in that sense. And therefore, when people are around us, it means they expect us to behave in certain ways, and we have this air of resilience around us. As soon as we start to move away from those things, self-doubt creeps in. Oh, should we be doing this? And am I really able to do this? And we start to question things because we haven't connected with the purpose and the values. So purpose and values for me are almost like a North Star that when things get really foggy and very misty and we lose sight of what's going on around us, we can still see the North Star. And that's the way that we're moving. We just put one step forward, knowing we're going to be okay again. So I think that's why it's so important. People that don't have that sometimes get a bit lost and lose their resilience.
So would it be something like restarting? Because it's like, you lost your purpose, you
Yeah.
probably forgot your values, and you just need to kickstart once again.
Yeah, and it's reconnecting because everyone I speak to, everyone I work with, always has this purpose and values from when they're very young, but they maybe forget or they lose contact with them or connection. And sometimes it's somebody else that comes into your relationship that reminds you of what they are because you feel a connection and energy. And you're right, we're reconnecting, rediscovering. They've always been there, but they've been hiding beneath the surface and therefore not serving our resilience. But as soon as they come to the surface, they start to help us.
All right. So moving ahead, what daily habits or practices really help leaders strengthen their, resilience over a long term? I mean, how to sustain it technically, in other words.
Yeah, it's a really hard thing to do, isn't it? So I think it's about minimizing distractions. We've all got our phones, all got our computers. We can be easily distracted. So it's making sure, as I said earlier, that we're very clear about what we're here to do today. We've got a clear agenda. We've got some flexibility within that. We're very clear that we're going to be present in those meetings. We're very clear about our intentionality in those meetings, what we want to get out of them. We're very clear about our boundaries in our relationships in terms of how we are going to work in those and not overstep them. And we're very clear how we're going to feel rewarded at the end of the day for doing our very best. And I think the best leaders, in terms of the habits they build, find ways of doing those things in terms of a routine, in terms of the people they have around them that complement them, in terms of maybe bringing them back to some of these habits, and also making sure that when we move away from those habits on a particular day, we are becoming aware of them, we recognize them, and put something in place the next day to reconnect with them again. So it's all about, I think you know this and the listeners do, when we're trying to reconnect with various ways of being, it usually takes about 3 weeks to actually reform habits. And so practicing that on a daily basis for 3 weeks can really reconnect us to being resilient.
So, Andrew, there's something that I would really want to know, and it could be out of context. Just correct me if I'm wrong here. We have leaders of all ages. We have leaders today who are probably in the 20s and certainly in the 50s and 60s. That is like, that has always been the norm. But today we have very young leaders also. Everybody is an entrepreneur, everybody has a startup, and they're doing pretty well also, no matter how much we criticize them. So, does this trait of being resilient, does it differ as such? I mean, with respect to age, I would like to know. I mean, the qualities in leaders are pretty much same, but does it really differ as such?
I think it does differ a little bit. I think what younger people tend to have more of a connection with around resilience is certainly the purpose, the why, because I think they're very clear about their values and what they want to do in life. Whether that's possible or not is another question, but they're very clear about that. I think for older people, sometimes we can lose connection with that through things that happen to us and we can forget. So I think there's maybe a slight difference there. I think the biggest difference is that I think sometimes younger people have such busy lives and a lot of pressure in their busy lives that maybe they don't create the space that older people sometimes can create. So older people sometimes have more choices in life. They've decided what's important to them in life. They create space for walking or for being, and sometimes younger people have difficulty with that. So I think out of the four factors I told you about earlier, resilience, I think the age groups differ with various different things, but it comes back to recognizing what we're missing and also then reconnecting with those. And I think sleep and a lack of sleep affects us all in terms of different ages. So I don't think that's different between the generations.
Lovely. Thanks a lot for clarifying that. So moving ahead, now we're almost at the end of the show. And before I let you go, I would really like to know, especially for the leaders who are listening to us at the moment, whether they're budding leaders or they are established leaders, if they feel very overwhelmed or exhausted. So what is that one simple step, that they can really take up in the daily routines or the daily lives that can help them to rebuild resilience at least?
There's some lovely work which the listeners can go and read or listen to by Byron Katie, Bryon, and then Katy. And Byron Katie is an American author, and she talks about asking ourselves a number of questions when we're feeling as you're describing. And what we're asking, the first thing is we're feeling this disruption where we're wondering whether we're going to be resilient or not, is just to say, is what happening right now and how I'm feeling about this really true? And then once we let that question sit with us, we ask the second question, which is, no, is it really true? What you're feeling now, what you're experiencing from this difficulty, is it really true? And then the third question is, who would you be right now if you didn't have that thought that's making you feel this way? Who would you be if you weren't having this thought right now in this situation? And then the fourth thing is all about, if you weren't having that thought, what would you do next? And it just allows us to become more clear that actually the only thing that gets in our way around us lowering our resilience is what's going on in our heads and the way that we're actually thinking about certain situations and what that leads to in terms of feelings. So in my view, there's not a lot out there that really is true. It's all in our heads, and we can reframe that with positive mindset and build our resilience every single day.
Lovely. So building our resilience every single day. Now that is the message of the day. And before I let you go, I'm sure our lovely listeners and your audience would really want to know what is that wonderful way to connect with you in order to know a little bit more about self-coaching.
Yeah, so the easiest way is to either go on LinkedIn and look up me there, Andrew Tallents, but also our website is just andrewtallents.com, and you can find lots of resources there and materials to support you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Andrew, for being on the show and enlightening us on this wonderful topic about resilience. Thanks a lot to my lovely audience and my lovely listeners also. Have a great day ahead, and keep on listening and watching to Tal Radio.